A robot rolls into the arena, its mechanical eyes scanning Twinkies' lifeless form. It calmly confirms what everyone already knows: Twinkies is dead and done. Leviathan steps forward, his voice booming across the silent crowd as he announces the verdict. Twinkies is officially unable to continue and the match is over. Dispatch ends here. The little pixie in the audience remains frozen, her tiny face a mask of disbelief. She clearly can't process what just happened. Panon, on the other hand, is buzzing with excitement. He nudges Grog, his tone practically screaming if he has seen that's the power of a Tier 1 nation. Grog, unimpressed as always, shrugs and fires back. If it were that other guy from earlier, he'd have died ages ago. Meanwhile, down a dimly lit hallway, Ackerman, the alien journalist, walks with a thoughtful expression. She mutters to herself, pondering the spectacle she just witnessed. It has been roughly 15 billion years since the universe's birth, and with infinite cosmoforce swirling around, she had thought all possible outcomes had already been seen. Yet here comes this Earthling, throwing all her assumptions out the window. She wonders why there's no data on Jinwol's strange abilities. Even with her civilization's vast information networks, nothing about him makes sense. Could it be a new power, or has someone deliberately hidden the truth? A sly smile creeps onto her face as she chuckles. This Earthling is proving far more interesting than she expected. Back in the arena, Leviathan raises his voice again, declaring the winner of preliminary round 8, Earth's representative, Jinwol. The crowd erupts. In the Earth team's corner, Claris quietly reflects on the match. He recalls how team leader Lena had anticipated this outcome, marveling at how someone as extraordinary as Jinwol could emerge from their ranks. In this moment, he realizes they might be witnessing an event that will be remembered throughout history. Jinwol shows no sign of slowing down. He continues to channel the cosmic force of the pixies as he pulls his sword out of Twinkies' lifeless body. For a moment, he appears lost in thought, as if considering his next move. Leviathan, ever the announcer, begins recapping the tournament. He highlights how representatives from 3 Tier 1 civilizations have managed to defeat so many lower-tier civilizations. However, before he can finish his sentence, Jinwol interrupts in the most dramatic way possible. Without warning, he charges straight at Leviathan, sword raised. His voice booms across the arena as he shouts at Leviathan, saying that strange energy of his has been bothering him since earlier. It seems Jinwol thinks Leviathan is the one who stands at the zenith of this world. With all his might, Jinwol unleashes a powerful attack. His blade arcs through the air, glowing with the white smoke slash that had torn through countless opponents before. But before the attack can land, Leviathan raises a single hand as if swatting away a minor inconvenience. A strange acidic mist surrounds Jinwol, dissolving everything in its path. Within moments, Jinwol collapses behind Leviathan, reduced to nothing more than a skeleton. So much for the mighty warrior. The entire audience sits in stunned silence. Claris watches in disbelief, his face frozen in shock. The seemingly invincible Jinwol has been turned into a pile of bones in mere seconds. Leviathan, thoroughly entertained by his own power, laughs loudly and casually announces that the match officially ends in a draw. He then turns to one of his assistants and tells them to deal with the mess. It's clear Leviathan has moved on to more important matters like his viewership stats. A robot approaches Leviathan and reports some surprising news. The match has just hit the #1 spot in viewership for its time slot. Leviathan, who was already feeling smug, pauses in disbelief. The robot continues, explaining that over 800 billion people watch the match live, and it has ranked as the highest viewed broadcast in all 5 regions hosting matches. Leviathan's laughter becomes manic as he processes the information. He asks for confirmation, still unable to believe it. The robot confirms again, adding that it has been 900 years since any match achieved such numbers. Leviathan, completely full of himself at this point, raises his arms in triumph. He declares to the universe that, of course, he could never be less popular than those other broadcasters. For Leviathan, popularity is clearly the only thing that matters, and his victory in the ratings has him on top of the world, or at least his ego is. Leviathan notices one of his assistants dragging Jinwol's barely alive skeleton into a trash bag, sweeping him up like yesterday's leftovers. He immediately orders the assistant to stop and demands an explanation. The assistant, clearly nervous, stammers that he's just doing what Leviathan told him, getting rid of this thing. Leviathan's tone shifts to something unusually serious. He sternly reminds the assistant that this thing is their star player. If the assistant has no respect for the star of the show, what does that say about him? The assistant freezes, probably rethinking every career choice that led him here. Leviathan, still holding his usual air of superiority, starts considering who should take care of Jinwol. It makes sense to entrust him to someone from his own civilization. After all, who else would want to deal with this mess? Meanwhile, in another part of the building, Lena is busy with a robot who won't stop yelling at her. The robot scolds her for breaking an insanely expensive piece of glass, pointing out that even if her entire civilization pooled their resources, they couldn't pay for the damage. Lena, however, barely listens. She's too preoccupied, reflecting on the match. From what she saw earlier, it seemed like Jinwol was dominating, which surprises her since she's heard Twinkies is one of the strongest powerhouses around. The robot grows more furious, snapping at Lena and demanding if she's even listening. She waves him off with a dismissive reply, acknowledging Twinkies' strength, but clearly not invested in the lecture. This only makes the robot angrier, accusing her of ignoring him completely. At that moment, another robot arrives and interrupts the argument. It tells Lena to follow, explaining that Leviathan has summoned her to pick up her representative. Lena looks confused for a moment, but quickly pieces it together. Her expression changes, and she curses under her breath, realizing that Jinwol must have done something outrageous again. She storms off toward the arena, her frustration evident. The first robot shouts after her, reminding her that she's still responsible for paying for broken glass. Lena doesn't even turn around. She's too busy rushing to find out what kind of mess her primitive teammate has caused this time. The robot leads Lena to Leviathan, who stands there looking as smug as ever. Leviathan informs her there's nothing urgent, just that her representative seems incapable of returning on his own. With an air of exaggerated nonchalance, he points to a ball-like structure. Inside, what remains of Jinwol has been crammed together, barely resembling anything human. Leviathan assures her that even though it looks bad, they performed some first aid. It is probably the bare minimum effort, but Leviathan says it like he's done her a favor. Lena reluctantly takes the ball containing her mangled teammate. Leviathan casually mentions that if she carries him to the recovery room, he'll eventually be fine. Clearly, Leviathan has washed his hands of the matter and expects her to deal with the mess. Later, Jinwol wakes up in a room, lying on a bed. His body aches, but he's alive. He notices Lena sitting nearby, slumped in a chair. She stirs, opening her eyes slightly, and mutters something about how surprising it is that he actually survived. She marvels at his strange ability, even suggesting it made the effort to attach the suppressor worth it. Her tone is more amused than concerned. Jinwol, still groggy, demands answers. He asks why Lena is here and what all the strange devices on him are about. He's particularly annoyed by the handcuffs and the odd neck cuff he's wearing. Lena waves off his questions, telling him to calm down and explaining that these are recovery devices. She says it so nonchalantly, as if restraining someone like him is completely normal. Her response only fuels his anger. Jinwol bristles at the implication that anyone dared to help him. Lena, unfazed, reminds him that as an Earthling from the weakest civilization in the universe, he's not exactly in a position to complain. She points to the neck cuff and informs him it's called the suppressor. As long as he wears it, he's no different from any other powerless Earthling. Her tone is almost mocking, as if to remind him where he stands in the grand cosmic hierarchy. Jinwol tries to dismiss her words as nonsense. He starts to break free of the restraints, declaring his intention to prove her wrong. But no matter how hard he struggles, the devices hold firm. Lena watches with a smug grin, commenting on how he can't even escape on his own. Her tone carries just enough sarcasm to kneel him further. Frustrated, Jinwol sighs and stops struggling. Instead, he tries to sense his mana, hoping to figure out what's wrong. Just as he focuses, he realizes something strange. His blood flow feels normal, but there's no energy, nothing coursing through him. Confusion clouds his mind as he reflects on what could possibly be happening to him. Lena smirks as she asks Jinwol how it feels to experience the GSP tournament firsthand. Her tone carries a mix of curiosity and mischief. Jinwol opens one eye, visibly confused, and demands clarification. Lena calmly explains that he just participated as Earth's representative in the fighting tournament. Jinwol stiffens and mutters something under his breath, clearly dreading her next words. Lena confirms his worst fear, adding that the arena where he fought that metal guy is the tournament stage. She presses further, teasingly asking if the fight fired him up enough to want to challenge more opponents. She even offers to remove all the restraining devices right away if he agrees to participate again. Annoyed, Jinwol cuts her off and demands she stop talking and release him immediately. Lena, unimpressed by his outburst, internally notes that threats like this don't work on him at all. She sighs and concludes she has no choice but to use a more extreme method. She pulls out a remote and presses a button, releasing his restraints. She starts to explain the conditions, but before she can finish, Jinwol lunges at her. He grabs her by the neck, lifting her effortlessly, and growls that unless she wants to be torn apart, she better remove the suppressor around his neck too. At that moment, Marcel appears, limping slightly and leaning on his stick, a reminder of his earlier battle with Twinkies. He's clearly in no rush to help Lena. Instead, he comments on the scene in front of him, casually wondering if this is some kind of lover's quarrel. His amused tone only makes the situation more absurd. Jinwol, irritated, drops Lena and demands an explanation about Marcel's presence. Lena, unfazed by nearly being strangled, informs Jinwol that the suppressor is not something he can remove by brute force. Her tone carries an edge of mockery as she proposes a simple bet. If Jinwol can defeat Marcel in a match, she promises to remove the suppressor immediately and leave him alone for good. However, if Jinwol loses, he will have to take Marcel's place and participate in the remaining preliminary matches. An hour later, Jinwol sits with Lena at an alien dining table, devouring alien food like a wild beast. His appetite is bottomless, and his table manners non-existent. Between mouthfuls, he grumbles at Lena, asking when they're going to fight. He's desperate to get rid of the cursed restraint around his neck. Lena, unfazed by his impatience, reminds him that they're here because he wouldn't stop complaining about being hungry. Jinwol pauses for a moment, clutching his stomach. He admits that he feels like he's about to burst, and then asks if this kind of hunger is normal for them. Lena raises an eyebrow and remarks that he's acting as if it is his first time feeling hunger. Still stuffing food into his mouth at an alarming speed, Jinwol replies that it is not his first time, but it's been so long that he barely remembers the feeling. Lena, curious, asks if people in the past didn't eat. Jinwol shrugs and clarifies that not everyone was like that, but at least the people from his time were stronger than the weaklings of this future. Lena doesn't take kindly to his remark. She scoffs and challenges him, saying they'll see if he still calls them weak after he fights Marcel later. Jinwol, unimpressed, points toward Marcel, who is silently eating across the table, and sarcastically asks if she means that guy. Lena, growing irritated, yells at Marcel, demanding he say something instead of just quietly eating. Marcel finally responds, his tone calm but laced with sarcasm. He mentions that he holds over 40 black belts in martial arts and has undergone rigorous military training in lethal techniques. Sure, he may have lost a limb or two, but his skills remain unmatched. Jinwol barely listens, waving a dismissive hand and stating that the outcome won't change, limbs or no limbs. This casual insult makes Marcel snap. He stands up, visibly furious, and hurls a string of curses at Jinwol. Jinwol leans back, calm as ever, and claims he's just stating facts. He suggests Marcel save everyone's time and admit defeat already. Marcel, clearly not over his earlier loss, starts to simmer. He mutters something about Jinwol being the reason he lost his limbs, throwing in vague mentions of revenge. Jinwol doesn't flinch. Instead, he accuses Marcel of blaming his own weakness on others and casually calls him a coward. Marcel's face turns red as he demands an explanation, refusing to let the insult slide. He challenges Jinwol, daring him to repeat it. Before things escalate further, Lena steps in. She looks at both of them like they're squabbling kids and declares that since they're both full now, it's time to settle this once and for all. The trio heads to the basement of the 80th floor GSP practice arena. Once they arrive, Lena points out the empty space and announces that they can fight here without interruptions. Jinwol scoffs, rumbling that they could have handled this back at the restaurant instead of wasting time. Lena shuts him down, reminding him that the future isn't like the violent era he came from. Here, fights can't just break out anywhere. Jinwol rolls his eyes and mutters that the future seems to be full of cowards. His words are loud enough for everyone to hear, but Lena doesn't even bother responding. Walking slightly behind Lena, Marcel leans in close to her. He hesitates before quietly voicing his concerns. He reminds her that they're supposed to be cooperating for Earth's sake, but this setup feels off. He admits he got a little too emotional earlier, but he's starting to think this fight isn't a good idea. Jinwol, after all, beat Twinkies, even with the suppressor around his neck. Marcel openly doubts he can handle someone like Jinwol in his current state. Lena, unfazed by his worries, assures him that there's nothing to stress about. She coolly mentions that everything has already been prepared. Marcel looks at her, unconvinced, but doesn't argue further. Jinwol stands impatiently in the middle of the arena, glancing back at Lena and Marcel. His expression is one of mild irritation. Lena waves at him and tells him to hold on, explaining that they need to set up a few things. Jinwol smirks and remarks that at least they didn't propose a fight without a plan. He then throws a taunt in Marcel's direction, pointing out that the guy next to her looks a bit scared and asking if he's going to be okay. Lena ignores the jab and pulls out a sleek, futuristic case. She opens it, revealing something that catches Marcel's attention immediately. She hands him his new gear and Marcel stares at it in disbelief. He asks what it is, and Lena casually explains that it is his new leg. She tells him to try it on, mentioning it might feel uncomfortable at first but will adjust to his body automatically. Marcel hesitates, but curiosity gets the better of him. He attaches the leg and takes a cautious step. His eyes widen as he realizes what he's using. He exclaims in shock, recognizing it as an artificial leg from the high-tech planet Artinos. Lena smiles, impressed by his knowledge, and confirms his guess. Marcel, still amazed, asks how she managed to get her hands on something so expensive. Lena shrugs and casually explains that she dipped into her savings and got a bit of help from the team. Elsewhere on the same planet, Mark stares at his dwindling account balance. Confused and frustrated, he wonders where all his money has disappeared to. Back at the arena, Lena sighs and mentions that buying an arm to match the leg was a bit out of budget. Marcel's face contorts into a mix of gratitude and disbelief as he thanks her, promising to do his best in the upcoming fight, even if it cost him his life. Lena, clearly unimpressed by the drama, tells him not to take it that far. Still waiting, Jinwol shouts at them from the middle of the arena, demanding to know if they're done yet. His patience is wearing thin, and he's eager to get rid of the suppressor around his neck. Marcel calls back, telling him to wait, and then strides toward the center of the practice arena. The new leg works perfectly, and Marcel's confidence seems to grow with every step. Before he reaches Jinwol, Lena calls out to him. She says there's something important she needs to tell him before the fight begins. Jinwol interrupts with a smirk, scoffing at the so-called preparation. He sarcastically remarks that he expected something amazing, only to find they were hyping up a toy leg. Marcel glares at him and snaps back, defending the prosthetic as something far beyond Jinwol's understanding. Lena chimes in, backing Marcel up and warning Jinwol not to get too cocky. Jinwol's grin widens and his demeanor shifts. His eyes glow red as he takes a fighting stance, exuding confidence. He dismisses their warnings, claiming arrogance doesn't lie with him, it's with them. Without another word, he launches himself at Marcel, ready to strike. But something unexpected happens. The speed of Jinwol seems off. His movements, usually precise and deadly, are sluggish. Marcel sidesteps the attack with ease, barely breaking a sweat. Jinwol, undeterred, tries again, but Marcel dodges effortlessly. This time, Marcel retaliates. Using the prosthetic leg, he delivers a powerful back kick straight to Jinwol's face. The impact sends Jinwol flying through the air before he crashes onto the ground. For a moment, the arena falls silent. Marcel chuckles, clearly satisfied. He reflects on how perfectly the leg worked, just as Lena had said it would. And as he watches Jinwol struggling to recover, Marcel recalls the words Lena shared with him earlier, her confidence in the plan now making complete sense. Earlier, Marcel had expressed his doubts to Lena. He asked if she was really telling him not to be afraid of facing Jinwol after seeing his last match. Lena reassured him with complete confidence, telling him that if he just fights like he normally would, winning will be a breeze. Marcel, still skeptical, promised to do his best but questioned her confidence. He started to point out how their opponent was clearly dangerous, but Lena cut him off before he could finish. She told him not to worry and began explaining. Lena revealed that Jinwol's physical abilities are currently worse than those of an average person. Marcel, clearly surprised, asked how that could be. Lena went on to explain that the suppressor Jinwol is wearing wasn't designed for lower-tier civilizations like theirs. Most systems within the Galactic Federation, including the temporary registration system, are built with upper-tier civilizations in mind. To put it bluntly, she said, it's like giving an elephant tranquilizer to a mouse. She added that Jinwol isn't aware of the suppressor's full effects because he hasn't been using martial arts yet. However, once the fight begins and he tries to exert more force, the suppressor will respond aggressively, keeping his abilities in check. Marcel listened carefully, but he still had reservations. He pointed out that suppressors are usually used for second-tier civilizations. He asked how Lena could know so much about their effects on someone from a first-tier civilization. Lena paused for a moment, her tone shifting. She remarked that it had been 20 years, a long time. She explained that in the past, the Galactic Federation turned a blind eye to the horrors of cosmic trafficking organizations. While she had been in hiding during those dark times, she managed to gather a wealth of information. With a sharp edge in her voice, she declared that knowledge itself is a powerful weapon. Now that someone like her, who wields this weapon, has emerged, she warned that the alien bastards better watch out. In the present, Marcel drives his knee into Jinwol again, sending him flying across the arena for a second time. Jinwol crashes to the ground, growing in frustration. As he struggles to push himself up to his knees, he curses Marcel and mutters bitterly that things would be different if it weren't for the cursed necklace around his neck. Lena, standing at the edge of the arena, shouts at Marcel, telling him to wrap things up because she needs to leave soon. Marcel hesitates and asks her if this kind of training will really help in the next match. He points out that, like Jinwol just said, if it weren't for the suppressor, someone like him wouldn't stand a chance. Before Marcel can finish his thought, Lena interrupts him with a sharp question. She asks what he thinks is the fundamental difference between higher civilizations and lower-tier ones like theirs. Marcel thinks for a moment and guesses that it's the ability to use cosmo force. Lena nods, acknowledging he's not wrong, but explains there's more to it. She goes on to say that, when looking at the bigger picture, the real difference is the potential to grow by breaking through the limits of common sense and physical boundaries. For Tier 1 humans, things like fire erupting from their bodies or creating weapons out of thin air are impossible feats, concepts that defy logic. But for higher civilizations, such abilities are as natural as breathing. If humanity ever advances to a higher level, what seems impossible now, like flying through the sky unaided or growing multiple limbs, might one day become possible. Lena emphasizes that this potential is tied to the amount of knowledge each civilization has access to, knowledge that corresponds to their rank in the Galactic Federation. Higher civilizations have an incomparably vast reservoir of information, and the true power of knowledge lies in how it's used. Without making the effort to learn, people won't even realize their own weaknesses, let alone address them. And in a situation like this, ignorance could mean losing everything. Lena continues her explanation, pointing out a critical issue with Jinwol's situation. Since his first match gained so much attention, it is highly likely that every detail of his fighting style has already been analyzed. Techniques like dodging or defending, which might seem natural to him, are now supplementary and predictable. She adds that his fighting style resembles that of aliens with regenerative abilities more than it does of humans. This similarity could easily become a fatal weakness in the next match. Marcel listens intently but can't help feeling a bit thrown off. He jokes that the way Lena talks, it sounds like she considers Jinwol an alien rather than a human. Pointing at Jinwol, he asks if he's really human. Lena brushes off his concerns, saying there's no need to overthink it. She assures him that Jinwol is genetically 100% human. She even double-checked when she had the chance just to be absolutely certain. Still skeptical, Marcel asks why there hasn't been any noticeable change in them as a civilization, even though they've made it past the first preliminary round. Lena calmly explains that such changes don't happen instantly. They occur gradually over time, so he doesn't need to worry. She then lays out the principles of civilization advancement, breaking it down step by step. Number 1, the representative of a civilization ascends to the next level of being after winning a match. Number 2, other members of the species do not immediately advance alongside the representative. And number 3, as long as the civilization's representative maintains their ranking, the civilization itself will gradually advance. She clarifies that the more Earth's representative wins, the closer humanity gets to understanding and interpreting laws beyond current Earth science. This could lead to breakthroughs such as the development of a miracle drug to save humanity or other advancements that seem impossible now. Finally, Lena emphasizes that the purpose of this training is to strengthen Jinwol's abilities under various constraints. By pushing him to adapt, they are not only ensuring his survival, but also maximizing the chances of Earth's progression through this tournament. Just then, a voice cuts through their conversation, commenting that something seems strange. Both Lena and Marcel turn their heads to see Lady Ackerman standing nearby. She greets them with a casual smile, introducing herself as nothing more than an ordinary space journalist. Lena narrows her eyes and immediately asks if Ackerman is an Inforian. Marcel, confused, asks Lena what that means. Lena explains that Inforians are those unsettling beings who can peek into people's minds using a pen-like tool, exactly like the one Ackerman is holding in her hand. Ackerman chuckles, clearly amused that Lena knows so much about her. Lena doesn't waste time and fires back with a question of her own, asking what Ackerman meant by strange after showing up out of nowhere. Ackerman responds calmly, pointing out that Lena's earlier explanation about Jinwol was strange. She elaborates, suggesting that Earth's limits are already beyond those of a Tier 1 civilization. In fact, Jinwol's abilities seem closer to those of a Tier 3 civilization. Ackerman proposes a theory, explaining that if Lena's explanation were correct, there should have been a noticeable change in Earth's status the moment Jinwol was registered as their representative. Yet there's been no sign of that. She hints that perhaps Jinwol isn't entirely a part of their civilization at all. Maybe he's something separate. Without waiting for a response, Ackerman steps forward, walking toward the unconscious Jinwol. She pulls out a mysterious device, holding it over him, and suggests that with this, she can confirm his identity. She claims she could uncover a secret so profound that even science hasn't managed to explain it. Before she can proceed, Marcel steps between her and Jinwol, shielding his teammate. He tells Ackerman to step back, his voice firm. He makes it clear that they can't trust her. Ackerman reflects silently, considering whether she should lure Jinwol to a place where the suppressor could be removed and deal with him there. However, she quickly rebukes herself, deciding against causing unnecessary commotion. There's no rush, she reasons, they have plenty of time. She changes her approach, saying she understands why they wouldn't trust an alien they just met. Still, she offers to reveal Jinwol's true identity if they ever want her help. With that, she starts to walk away. And as she leaves, Ackerman suddenly stops and turns her head back toward them. For the first time, she lifts her gaze and remarks that she's curious about Jinwol too. Her voice carries an odd tone, somewhere between intrigue and amusement. She walks away laughing, leaving behind an air of mystery. Marcel breaks the silence, asking Lena what she thinks about Ackerman. Lena shrugs, dismissing Ackerman's words as mere curiosity. She suggests that Ackerman is likely just spouting nonsense because Jinwol intrigues her. Lena reminds Marcel that regardless of what Ackerman said, they don't have any other options. Their only task is to bet everything on their last remaining hope and ensure Jinwol wins the next match. That's all that matters now. 15 days later, the GSP tournament arena buzzes with excitement. Leviathan steps forward, his voice booming as he announces the start of the second preliminary round for Group 8. He introduces the first contestant, a representative of the Tier 2 transfer civilization, Birkin. Leviathan elaborates on Birkin's impressive credentials, ranked 5,830th among civilizations, a player who passed the first round in record time, and a being with a rare ability to control their own cosmic energy. Birkin is described as a guardian deity who receives energy from 400,000 of their kind to protect their planet. The crowd watches in awe, their murmurs filling the arena. All eyes are on Birkin, whose enormous inhibitors barely contain the sheer power radiating from him. As the suppressors break apart with a deafening roar, Birkin lets out a feral cry that shakes the arena. The announcer declares with excitement that a beast with immense power has finally been unleashed into the arena. Meanwhile, Lena stands in the observation area with Mark by her side, both focused on Birkin. Mark comments that it's not every day they get to see something this intense. Lena, unbothered, tells him not to worry and cryptically adds that their side will be just as eye-catching. Mark, puzzled, asks her what she means, but Lena only smiles and tells him to wait and see. Leviathan's voice booms again, shifting the focus to Birkin's opponent. He announces the arrival of a representative from the lowest-ranked Tier 1 civilization, a player who accomplished the impossible by defeating Twinkies, the universe's greatest metal controller. As the crowd holds its breath, Jinwol steps into the arena, but his appearance leaves everyone stunned. He's carrying a stick, his other arm wrapped in layers of bandages. He looks like he just crawled out of a war zone. Leviathan, watching from his platform, exclaims in disbelief, questioning why Jinwol is in such a state. Mark turns to Lena, horrified, and demands to know how she could let their representative appear like this. Lena, completely unfazed, calmly reminds Mark that she told him their side would draw attention too. Mark, still in disbelief, argues that this is beyond reckless. Lena waves him off, confidently stating that this level of injury is nothing for someone like Jinwol. As if on cue, the suppressors around Jinwol begin to break apart. The announcer, now even more animated, announces that Jinwol's inhibitors are being released. The crowd erupts with mixed reactions, some in awe, others in confusion over his battered appearance. Marcel, standing beside Lena and Mark, cheers enthusiastically for Jinwol, shouting words of encouragement. He reminds Jinwol to show the results of his hard training. His optimism is almost infectious, but Jinwol clearly doesn't share the sentiment. In the arena, Jinwol clenches his fists, furious. He grabs his own head in frustration and mutters curses aimed at his own teammates. He ceases, vowing to kill those who dare to humiliate him like this. However, after a deep breath, he growls that a promise is a promise. First, he'll deal with the so-called monster in front of him. Then he'll settle the score with the bastards responsible for his current state. And that was it from today's video. I hope that you liked today's video, and if you did, hit that like button as today's like goal is 1,500 likes. Comment next part down below to see what happens next. Also, consider subscribing with the notification bell on to get notified as soon as a new video drops onto the channel. You can also join the channel to support me financially and watch videos before public release. I'll meet you in the next video. Until then, thanks for watching.